mentioned a little bit ago, Barca pouring in the goals, especially since the turn of the year. They're even having shots bouncing off of players and going in. What's not to like about these Catalans right now?
Yeah, it was a nice, relaxing Sunday for Hansi Flick and his men on Sunday. I think if you were to put that question to Hansi Flick, he'd probably say the starts and the endings. We're just about coming to the end of the middle third of the season now. And against Atletico Madrid last week in the Copa del Rey, they conceded 2 goals in the opening 6 minutes and 2 goals in the final 10 minutes. And I think there's a feeling that later on, when the press kind of dies down a little bit, when it's a little bit less intense, that they're a little bit more vulnerable. Whereas at the start of games as well, they're also a little bit sleepier out the blocks. But having said that, there are games like against Real Sociedad where it feels like Lamine Yamal, Robert Lewandowski, they're playing against themselves and kind of competing and setting their own challenges for them to break, as opposed to necessarily trying to win the game. So yeah, there is a lot to be positive about for Barcelona and Hansi Flick, and it feels like they are a few tweaks of having a really impressive season.
All right, you heard it, a few tweaks. Maybe we'll have you back on to see what you think those tweaks should be. Now, just 3 points separating the top three. All three know what it takes to win the league. What do you think will be the difference down the stretch?
Yeah, it's an absolutely delicious title race that we have. I think for me, the thing that will define this title race is the team that least gives itself the least amount of heroics to do. I think these three sides have all demonstrated that they can turn things around, that they have the quality and the offensive firepower to really kind of pull out games from situations where it feels like it's impossible for them to win. Yeah, I think the teams that give themselves the least amount of that to do will probably triumph, because each of these sides has weaknesses. Each of these sides, we've seen them go down and struggle for periods in the league this season. And Atletico, for instance, they've scored 16 goals in the last kind of few minutes of games over this season. Barcelona, we've seen them kind of have a dip. Real Madrid too. So I think whichever of these sides gives itself the least to do in the time when it's going to be hardest on the legs mentally and physically, that's probably the side that's going to triumph.
All right, vroom, vroom. Let's shift gears on this world sport, right? We're going to switch to the Champions League and the Madrid derby on Tuesday, Rory. A lot of history between these two teams in this competition. Real Madrid are the holders. Do you think it's an advantage or disadvantage to be playing their city rivals in the playoffs?
Honestly, I think it's a minor disadvantage. I think Carlo Ancelotti and Real Madrid have an aura, and they have a kind of special feeling when it comes to the Champions League. When that music comes on, things change for Real Madrid. But against an Atletico side that Ancelotti doesn't have a great record against Diego Simeone. He's only one win in the last few years against him. A side that has played them so many times in recent years that maybe that aura or that kind of respect that other sides show them isn't quite there. So I think although Real Madrid have a brilliant record against Atleti in Europe in general, I think this matchup doesn't necessarily suit Los Blancos because of that kind of familiarity and because of the fact that Diego Simeone's men will be extra motivated and fired up to get one over on their rivals.
Let's dig into the details here. Take us inside the mind of Carlo Ancelotti and Diego Simeone, two of the elite managers. What chess moves might we expect to see from them?
Carlo Ancelotti's had a tricky season because of injuries, because of form. It feels like it's a bit of a whack-a-mole season for Real Madrid. Every time a problem comes up and he solves it, another one seems to appear. Dani Ceballos had really kind of fixed the Real Madrid midfield to a certain extent, allowing them to control games and to set the tempo a little bit more and provide service for Kylian Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., that front line that we know so well. But he's injured out now. Fede Valverde is probably going to move to right back. So that leaves Carlo Ancelotti improvising a little bit in the middle of the park. He's got a choice between Luka Modric or Tchouaméni or Camavinga, midfielders that we know are very good, especially in the case of Modric, but we don't know if they can necessarily control the game. Atletico, for Diego Simeone, I think it's a case of how ambitious do you want to be? Because you know that this Real Madrid side has weaknesses, but do you kind of really go for it? That's what we saw in the derby in February. It was a 1-1 draw, but it felt like Atleti maybe sat back a little bit too much when they could have really gone for the throat.